You don't always need to do more to grow. Sometimes you need to stop doing the very things that are holding you back. And the truth is, most men don't fail because of what they don't know. They fail because of what they refuse to let go of. You can chase new habits, buy new courses, or watch endless motivational videos, but none of it matters if you keep repeating the same mistakes that silently destroy your progress. What if I told you that leveling up isn't about adding more pressure on your shoulders? It's about removing the weight that doesn't belong there. It's about cutting off the habits that drain your confidence and steal your focus. If you're serious about becoming the man you want to be, then it's time to stop doing these 7 things and finally make room for growth. Most men go through life without realizing how much their habits shape the quality of their days and the strength of their confidence. You can wake up every morning with plans to grow, succeed, and push forward, but if you're stuck in patterns that drain you, then no amount of motivation will ever be enough. It's not always about what you need to add to your life. Sometimes it's about what you need to stop doing, because the truth is, bad habits don't just stay in one area of your life, they spill into everything. How you think, how you act, how you connect with people, and how you carry yourself when you don't stop to notice them, they become a silent force working against you, and the more you ignore them, the more they dig in and take control. Think about how easy it is to fall into autopilot when you're repeating the same routines without asking if they're even serving you. Maybe you scroll endlessly at night, convincing yourself it's just a way to relax, but deep down, you know it's stealing your energy for the next day. Maybe you keep holding on to anger, thinking it makes you strong when all it really does is weigh you down and keep you from focusing on the things that actually matter. Maybe you avoid the uncomfortable conversations because you'd rather not deal with conflict, but the cost of avoiding truth is always bigger than the discomfort of facing it. And when these patterns go unchecked, they create a version of you that is smaller, weaker, and more controlled by circumstance than by choice. Most men don't lack ambition. They lack the ability to cut off the habits that keep them stuck. You can set all the goals you want, but until you stop what's working against you, you'll always feel like you're running uphill without making progress. The cycle looks the same over and over again. You push forward, then something invisible holds you back. You try harder, but the results don't match the effort, and eventually you start questioning yourself instead of questioning the behaviors that are silently draining you. This is why stopping the wrong things is often more powerful than adding new things, because growth isn't just about expansion, it's about removal, removing the noise, removing the distractions, removing the self-sabotage. The challenge is that some of these behaviors feel comfortable. They feel normal because you've been doing them for so long, and comfort tricks you into believing it's harmless. But comfort is one of the biggest thieves of progress. What feels easy now usually costs you more later. So when you keep repeating patterns that hurt you, you're trading long-term strength for short-term comfort. And most of the time, you don't even realize the trade is happening until you look back and wonder why you're still in the same place months or years later. The truth is, every man has habits that either build him up or break him down, and no one is immune from the pull of the destructive ones. But what separates men who grow from men who stay stuck is awareness and action, awareness of the behaviors that are holding them down, and action to cut them off before they steal more time, energy, and confidence. This isn't about perfection, it's about ownership. Because the moment you take ownership of what you need to stop doing, you start building a version of yourself that's harder to break. You start noticing how much stronger and clearer you feel when you're not carrying the weight of habits that drain you, and you begin to understand that growth is less about doing more and more, about letting go of what doesn't belong in the first place. Letting go of certain behaviors is more powerful than constantly adding new ones, because no matter how many strategies you try or how many positive habits you stack, if you keep dragging around the same destructive patterns, you are always going to feel like you're fighting uphill. Imagine trying to fill a cup that already has holes in it. No matter how much you pour in, it keeps leaking out. And that's exactly how it works with growth. If you don't patch the leaks by stopping what's draining you, then all the effort you're putting in will never give you the results you want. You can be reading books, going to the gym, listening to motivational talks, working late nights. And yet, if you keep allowing the wrong behaviors to remain in your life, it cancels out everything good you're trying to build. The mistake most men make is thinking that success is only about doing more, waking up earlier, pushing harder, adding routines, and chasing every new strategy. But the truth is, progress is not just addition, it's subtraction. And subtraction is often harder because it forces you to face yourself in a way that addition doesn't. When you add a habit, it feels productive, it feels like you're moving. But when you subtract a behavior, it forces you to confront why you've been holding on to it in the first place. Maybe it's comfort, maybe it's fear, maybe it's pride, and letting go requires strength because it means cutting ties with the very things that you've convinced yourself you need. But in reality, they're the exact things blocking your growth. When you stop carrying destructive patterns, you give yourself space. And space is one of the most underrated keys to growth because when you're overloaded with noise, you can't see clearly, you can't think clearly, and you definitely can't move with intention. But when you create space by cutting out what doesn't serve you, you open the door for better choices. You start to notice opportunities that were always there, but hidden behind the clutter, you begin to feel a sense of freedom that comes from not being chained to things that drain your energy, and that freedom allows you to focus on what actually matters. There's power in removing the things that sabotage you because those small decisions create ripple effects. If you stop lying to yourself about what you really want, you start making choices that align with your values. If you stop numbing yourself with distractions, you suddenly have the time and clarity to invest in things that bring long-term reward. If you stop chasing validation from people who don't care about you, you free up the energy to build confidence that actually lasts. This is why stopping can be even more transformative than starting, because what you cut out often determines how much impact everything else will have. Think about it like building a house. If the foundation is cracked, it doesn't matter how many walls you build or how many decorations you add, it's always going to collapse under pressure. And your habits are that foundation. The destructive ones are cracks, and no amount of good habits can fully make up for them until you repair the damage by stopping what doesn't belong. And once you do, every new thing you add suddenly has power. It sticks, it compounds, it actually builds momentum instead of being swallowed by the cracks. The truth is, men often avoid stopping because it feels harder than starting. But the hardest choices are usually the ones that free you the most. Stopping certain behaviors isn't about losing, it's about creating room for better. It's about finally stepping out of cycles that keep you trapped and realizing that growth is less about adding layers and more about peeling off what's been weighing you down. Once you understand that letting go can be the most powerful action you take, you begin to see that true strength is not just found in how much you can do, but in what you're willing to stop doing so you can become who you were meant to be. Stopping destructive patterns creates space for healthier choices and relationships because when you're caught up in cycles that drain you, they don't just affect your own growth, they spill over into the way you connect with others, the way you show up in your relationships, and the way people experience you. Destructive patterns are like background noise. They never stop humming in your life. And even when you think you've learned to tune them out, everyone around you can still feel the vibration. They sense the lack of presence. They feel the weight you carry. They see the hesitation, and it influences the way they respond to you without you even realizing it. So when you continue repeating the same patterns, whether it's anger, avoidance, negativity, or overthinking, you're not just sabotaging yourself, you're also limiting the depth of connection and respect you can build with others. Healthy relationships, both personal and professional, are built on presence, trust, and consistency. But destructive habits rob you of those qualities when you cling to resentment. You can't give people your full attention when you chase validation. You lose the ability to stand firm in who you are when you constantly avoid responsibility. Others can't trust you to lead or depend on you to follow through these patterns. Make relationships feel shallow because they strip away authenticity. And without authenticity, you can't create the kind of bonds that bring meaning and growth. But when you stop feeding those destructive cycles, something shifts. Space opens up, and in that space, you finally allow healthier choices to take root. Think of it like cleaning out a room that's been cluttered for years. At first, it feels overwhelming because you've lived with the mess so long, you barely notice it anymore. But the moment you start clearing it out, you realize how much space you actually have. You see the floor again, you notice the light coming in, and suddenly there's room for something new, something better. That's exactly what happens when you cut out destructive behaviors. You make space for patience where anger used to live. You make space for clarity where distractions once consumed you. You make space for discipline where laziness kept you stuck. And that space becomes the soil where better choices and stronger relationships can grow. When you stop destructive patterns, you also send a powerful message to yourself and to others. You're saying, I value growth more than comfort. I value honesty more than excuses. I value discipline more than distraction. And people notice that shift. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it in the way you carry yourself. And they begin to treat you differently because respect always follows consistency, and self-respect always comes before external respect. This is why stopping destructive patterns doesn't just change what you do. It changes how you're seen. It changes how people trust you, how they listen to you, and how they choose to connect with you. Most men underestimate the impact of their destructive cycles on their relationships because they think habits are personal, but nothing you do stays only with you. Your patterns ripple into every conversation, every decision, every moment of presence or absence. If you constantly avoid conflict, your partner feels it. If you're addicted to distractions, your children feel it. If you let anger run your life, your friends and coworkers feel it. So when you stop these patterns, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for everyone who interacts with you, because better habits create safer, stronger, and more supportive environments for connection. It's not easy to break patterns that have lived in you for years, but the reward of creating space is always greater than the comfort of staying stuck when you stop repeating cycles that hurt you and everyone around you. You don't just remove the negative. You open doors for the positive. You create room for healthier conversations. You give yourself the ability to listen without reacting. You build the strength to choose patience over anger, and you create the kind of consistency that makes people want to trust you and respect you. The destructive patterns that once drained you become the very fuel that pushed you to grow into a healthier, stronger, and more dependable version of yourself. And that shift will always show up first in the quality of your relationships and the choices you now have the space to make. Real strength comes from self-control, not just action, because anyone can act on impulse, but not everyone can hold themselves back. When the moment demands restraint, the world often confuses loud, aggressive action with power. But the reality is, the men who move with the most authority are usually the ones who know how to control themselves when they're angry, when they're tempted, when they're pressured, when they're tested. Real strength isn't proven in how hard you can hit back. It's proven in how disciplined you can stay when your emotions are pushing you to lose control. Because every time you react without thinking, you hand over your power. But every time you choose control, you build it. Self-control is the difference between temporary wins and long-term success, because action alone might get you a quick result, but it won't sustain it. Anyone can grind for a week. Anyone can push through for a day. Anyone can make a bold move when motivation is high. But what about when the excitement fades? What about when you're tired, when you're frustrated, when things don't go the way you planned? That's where self-control matters most, because it's the anchor that keeps you steady when everything else is unstable. Without it, you'll chase shortcuts, lose focus, and keep starting over. Instead of building something that lasts with it, you create consistency, and consistency is where real power comes from. Think about the men who inspire you the most. They're rarely the ones who act out of impulse. They're the ones who stay calm under pressure. They're the ones who hold their ground when others are losing their heads. They're the ones who don't let anger or ego dictate their choices, and that calm, steady presence is what makes people trust them, follow them, and respect them. More action without control often leads to regret, but control before action leads to respect because people can feel the difference between someone who's reckless and someone who's intentional. Self control also protects your energy because when you're constantly reacting to everything around you, you burn out quickly. Every distraction steals your focus. Every argument drains your energy. Every impulsive choice leaves you cleaning up the mess later. But when you have control, you know what to ignore, you know what to let go of, and you know when to walk away. Instead of proving yourself in every battle, not every fight is worth fighting. Not every opinion is worth your response. Not every challenge is worth your time. And self control gives you the wisdom to know the difference, that wisdom is strength because it allows you to conserve your energy for the things that actually move your life forward. Many men mistake control for weakness. They think holding back means you're scared or you're soft. But in reality, it takes far more strength to stay calm when everything in you wants to explode. It takes more strength to keep your standards high. When temptation is calling, it takes more strength to wait for the right moment than to rush into the wrong one. And that kind of strength builds character because it's not just about what people see, it's about who you're becoming in the moments when no one is watching. Every time you choose self control, you're training yourself to master your emotions instead of being mastered by them. And that mastery is what separates men who grow from men who stay stuck. Self-control is not about never taking action. It's about making sure your action is aligned with who you want to be. It's about having the patience to hold back when it's not time and the courage to move forward when it is. It's the balance between restraint and action that creates real power because without control, action is just noise. But with control, action becomes precise, intentional, and effective. The strongest men are not the loudest. They are the most disciplined. They are the ones who can carry weight without showing it, who can walk through storms without letting the storm live inside them, who can choose peace over chaos and wisdom over impulse. That is the kind of strength that lasts because it's built on self-control, not just action. The fastest way to level up is to quit what's holding you down because no matter how much effort you put into building new habits or chasing new goals, if you keep carrying dead weight, it will always slow you down. Most men make the mistake of thinking success is only about addition, adding more routines, more responsibilities, more commitments, more pressure. But the truth is, you don't get faster by carrying more. You get faster by letting go of what's unnecessary. The things that once felt comfortable can become chains if you refuse to release them. And sometimes growth isn't about climbing higher. It's about dropping the baggage that's been quietly stealing your energy. When you look at what's really holding you back, it's rarely a lack of resources or opportunities. It's usually the things you refuse to let go of. Maybe it's toxic people who drain you, but you keep them close because of history. Maybe it's habits that give you temporary relief, but cost you long-term progress. Maybe it's excuses you tell yourself because they're easier than facing the truth. Quitting. These things feels uncomfortable because you've tied part of your identity to them. You've convinced yourself you need them. But the reality is, they're the very reason you're stuck. And the moment you decide to let them go, you'll feel lighter, clearer, and more capable of moving forward. Quitting what holds you down is powerful because it creates momentum. When you stop feeding distractions, you suddenly have more time to invest in what matters. When you stop giving energy to negativity, you have more mental space to focus on solutions. When you stop settling for less than you deserve, you open the door to opportunities that match your potential. Most people think momentum comes from starting new things, but momentum actually grows fastest when you stop the things that drain it, because energy flows where focus goes. And when your focus is no longer scattered by habits that pull you backward, all of your energy can finally push you forward. There's a reason successful men often talk about discipline as subtraction instead of addition. It's because they know you can't carry everything and expect to run far. If you want to level up, you have to choose what to leave behind. That could mean quitting the need for validation so you can finally build confidence from within. It could mean quitting the habit of procrastination so you stop living in cycles of delay. It could mean quitting the comfort of excuses So you finally face the reality that growth requires change. Quitting is not weakness. Quitting the wrong things is wisdom because it clears the path for strength to take over. Every man has a list of things he needs to quit, but most avoid it because quitting feels like losing. What they don't realize is that holding on is what's really costing them the most time, energy, peace, opportunities, all wasted because of an unwillingness to let go. The courage to quit is what frees you because the things you quit define you just as much as the things you choose to start quitting. Laziness builds discipline. Quitting negativity builds optimism. Quitting distraction builds focus. Quitting fear builds courage. Quitting doubt builds belief. The fastest path to a stronger version of yourself is not piling on more. It's cutting off what weakens you. You can spend years chasing the perfect routine or searching for the right opportunity, but none of that will matter if you're weighed down by the very patterns that cancel out your progress. The truth is, you already know what's holding you back. You already know the habits, the relationships, the distractions, the excuses. The question is whether you have the strength to quit them, because the men who grow are not the ones who carry the most. They are the ones who are light enough to move freely. Quitting is not the end, it's the beginning, because every time you let go of what holds you down, you create space for what lifts you up, and that space is where leveling up really happens.